Welcome to a Conan Chronicles special edition podcast on the Northman, directed by Robert Eggers and starring Alexander Skarsgard, Nicole Kidman, Anya Taylor-Joy, Ethan Hawke, Bjork, and Willem Dafoe.
You must choose between kindness for your kin or hate for your enemies.
Your strength breaks men's bones. I have the cunning to break their minds.
And night by night, we will carry out my pledge of vengeance. I will avenge you, Father.
I will avenge you, Father.
I will save you, Mother.
I will save you, Mother.
I will kill you, Father.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to a special edition podcast of Conan Chronicles. We're not going to be reviewing something Conan licensed, I suppose, today. But my friend Austin, who I have with me today, he and I went to go see a new movie, and we're both big fans of the director who made this movie, and it's very Conan-esque, so we thought it was tangentially related enough that we could justify doing a podcast on it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have like 8,000 movies to do for the Patreon show that have nothing to do with Conan, so I figured we could tackle this.
Yeah, exactly. For the Patreon show, we made like a list of even some like terrible barbarian B movies. What was the name of the one that you found that's in space again?
Oh, it's not in space, but it's Your Hunter from the Future, which is like a barbarian movie for like the entire runtime, and then in the climax, stormtroopers show up and you find out it's the future.
That's amazing. It's like Planet of the Apes, but with Conan and stormtroopers.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are we here to review today, Austin? They'll see it by the title, I hope, but introduce the film a little bit for us.
So we're reviewing The Northman, which is Robert Eggers' third film, and it's like an Icelandic folktale that was like the inspiration for Hamlet. So there's a lot of like the Hamlet kind of structure to it, and it's also just very like Norse mythology inspired, and there's like a ton of Conan stuff in it, especially like it feels like an update of the Arnold movies in a way, with some of the kind of hallmarks of those, or at least the first one, because the first one's a bit darker.
Yes. No, I agree with that 100%. We'll get into it a bit as we kind of get into the movie, but as a fan of both Norse mythology and Conan, I was very, very pleased with the movie. And it makes sense that even if Robert Eggers wasn't trying to make a movie that was like Conan or even take inspiration from it, it makes sense that it feels like the first Arnold movie, because John Milius, when he was making the first one, said that the reason he did it was because he wanted to make a Viking movie, and that was kind of his like way to get a Viking movie made in the Hollywood system.
True. Well, and of course you have a Valkyrie.
Yes. And, of course it makes sense too, because Robert E. Howard was inspired by Norse mythology and the Vikings quite a bit in the creation of Conan. I mean, he's a guy from the frozen north. He comes from a tribe of warriors and all that kind of stuff. So, there's a lot of similarities there. So before we get into it, I just want to say to everyone, since this is a new movie that came out recently, fair warning, we're going to spoil the shit out of this movie. So if you don't want to, know anything about it and you want to go in blind, I think Austin and I can say if you like things like Conan, this is a movie that's definitely worth seeing, and you should go see it because it doesn't seem to be making a lot of money at the box office right now. It lost the weekend to some animated movie called Bad Guys, so please support.
Well, it came in what, third or fourth in the weekend overall?
I think it was third or something.
Yeah. Yeah, very unfortunate. I mean, this is one of those movies, like the second they announced it and Robert Eggers was like, oh, I'm working with a bigger budget, I was like, oh no, like this is gonna bomb. And I've been preparing myself ever since, and it still hurt when it happened.
Yeah, and this movie wasn't helped by the COVID delays either, because
of course,
it's my understanding that the original projected budget was around 60 million, and then with the COVID delays and everything, it ballooned to between 70 and 80 were the predictions I saw. So yeah, it's probably not going to make its money back, which is unfortunate, but at least Eggers got to make one movie where he kind of got to work with a little bit more budget wise. I expect that after this he'll go back and make something a little smaller.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't think this will hurt his career at all. But I agree. I think he'll go back to more of like the A24 kind of like size, like what the Lighthouse and the Witch were.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. Let's first talk about Robert Eggers as a filmmaker, I suppose, because we're both fans of him. He's the director of this film. He's also the writer of it. I think he co-wrote this with someone, didn't he? Yes,
he co-wrote it with, it's like, excuse my like horrible pronunciation, but it's like Sean or something. It's like SJON.
Oh, okay.
So I assume probably like for authenticity, like they kind of worked on it together, because that's clearly a very big thing for Eggers.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of the things I love about him as a director. His first two films, The Witch and The Lighthouse, for those of you who haven't either seen them or heard of them, those movies are fantastic. You should check those out too. But he's very big on historical accuracy in making his films. Like The Witch and The Lighthouse were both heavily researched to the point where, Robert Eggers wrote those two movies in the vernacular of the people at the time would have spoken. And it's really interesting. So he's very much into historical research. And I know for this one specifically, he did consult with Viking archaeologists that are at the top of their field. At least that's what he said in interviews. So that kind of authenticity shows in his first two films and in this one. So that's not surprising that he worked with someone to co-write the script that's knowledgeable about this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. For Robert Eggers, he's put out 3 films so far. And I think all 3 of them are like 5 out of 5s for me. Like they're all 3 of them are like modern classics. They're just kind of perfect.
Yeah, I agree.
And then when you rank them, it's very like I don't know. I guess I like this one slightly more. Like,
no, exactly.
It's that kind of a thing.
And I think it comes down to like your story sensibilities and the subject matter that you're interested in. Like, I like The Lighthouse slightly more than The Witch, just because it's a bit more of a Kubrickian kind of movie that's also a pseudo modern adaptation of Greek mythologies, and the two performances in it are just amazing. Not that The Witch performances aren't amazing either, but like I love Willem Dafoe, and I'm quickly becoming a fan of Robert Pattinson based on that movie and his Batman movie that he just made that he's also fantastic in. So I like that movie slightly more than The Witch, and like The Witch is also, like you said, one of my favorite films I've ever seen. So it's very difficult.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think for me, I like the Witch slightly more, but it's really hard. I also like COVID, I think really like helped the Lighthouse for me, because I watched it the first time and I was like, oh, this is great. Like I don't know which one's better. And then I watched it a second time because when COVID started, I was at my mom's house visiting, and it was kind of like just kind of stuck there during quarantine. And it was like, I rewatched it, and it was like, man, that's how I feel right now. Like, this movie is really great.
Yep. And that's what appeals to me about it, because I'm a big fan of The Shining, which of course is also a movie about how isolation affects the psyche, and a bunch of other stuff too. But that's like, at least on the surface, like anybody that watches The Shining can get that out of it, even if you don't delve into the more weird Kubrickian stuff and speculate about the other themes of the film and stuff. So it spoke to me on that level. But, I'm also, I grew up in New England. So, I grew up, going on field trips to Salem, Massachusetts, and like seeing where the witch trials happened, going to the witch museum. So that kind of mythology was always in my kind of purview from a very young age. And I find all that stuff super interesting because it's a part of the place that I grew up in. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, I really need to check out that witch stuff because that sounds awesome.
Yeah. If you ever come and visit this area of the States, I'll definitely take you to that place because you would love it, especially around Halloween time. They just do a ton of really cool Halloween-y events at the Witch Museum. It's really cool. But enough gushing about Robert Eggers' other films. Our kind of intro talking about his other films, I think, will be important because one of the things that I really loved about this movie is that it is a little bit of a bigger movie in that, more money is spent on it, but it still feels like kind of a small, intimate movie in many ways, like The Witch and the Lighthouse are. It still retains that signature Eggers style where you're kind of like locked into a few characters and their arcs throughout the film, and they're very well fleshed out. You get to know them, their triumphs, their losses, their flaws, and their great qualities, which all of the characters in this movie are very layered. It's cool that we kind of got, an Eggers movie that is such a sprawling epic, but it's also still just kind of a movie about mythology and the characters within the story, like The Witch and the Lighthouse are, because those movies are very much about mythology as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and like you said with the Lighthouse, and I think it goes for The Witch too. There's this like level of just separation where you're in the middle of nowhere, just with nobody else around.
Yeah,
and surprisingly, there is an element of that in this movie too, despite obviously getting bigger.
Yeah. No, definitely. Because okay, so I guess we'll start talking about the plot because this is a good segue into this. So we start out the film, kind of in one of the Viking kingdoms, and Amleth, who's the main character, he's a young boy. His father is killed by his uncle, sort of like in Hamlet. He escapes, makes a vow of vengeance to kill his uncle, avenge his father, and save his mother, who he at the time perceives her as being taken away screaming by his uncle, and he marries her. And they kind of establish their own kingdom, and then the king of Norway kind of kicks them off their land. And they go to live in a isolated farm village in Iceland, and that's where the majority of the film takes place, is in this kind of small farm village.
Yeah, exactly. They're like sheep farmers with a bunch of slaves.
Yeah,
very rich sheep farmers.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the way that slavery is portrayed and used as a device to examine the characters in the movie. I thought all that stuff was fascinating. But yeah, so in between the time when Amleth meets back up with his uncle, he is sort of wandering aimlessly as a Viking berserker. He's a professional warrior that goes and raids other villages. They do the whole Viking rape, pillage, and burn thing to a village towards the beginning of the film. And then he's visited in the night by a Norn, which in Norse mythology is this kind of mythological being that spins what's called the strings of fate, and everyone has one, and it's kind of like what the plan is for your life that the Norse gods have created for you, and they know what's going to happen at the beginning of your life, what you'll do throughout it, and how you'll die. And the Norn reminds him to not forget the person for which he shed his last teardrop, which was his father, and then that kind of reignites his interest in fulfilling this vow for revenge he made when he was a child. So he pretends to be a slave, and he goes on a ship. He stows away on a ship, which is a vessel that's taking slaves from the land of the Rus, which is modern day Russia. And he meets the woman who will become his love, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. They go to this village to work as slaves. He's masquerading as a slave because he wants to kind of be low-key and, methodically destroy his uncle's life, which he does throughout the film and in many interesting ways. And yeah, that's kind of the basic plot structure of the movie. There's other, of course, plot developments towards the middle and end of the film, but that's kind of basically what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Like once he gets there, a lot of it's just kind of like him planning and like doing actions to help take his uncle down.
Yes. So I guess we'll start with you, Austin, and just talk a little bit for us about what sorts of things that you liked about the movie, and we'll kind of springboard from there.
Okay, so I guess I'll go like right off from the start. I had like a gigantic smile on my face when this movie opens to basically the opening narration of like the Conan movies.
Yes.
It was awesome. Like, oh, okay, here we go. And you get like the Odin's ravens flying by, or crows flying by. As like the ships come in.
Yep.
One of the other big things I was just going into it, because Robert Eggers obviously, like we've talked about, is a smaller like horror guy before this.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know like how his action was going to be because he's never really done action. So it was like, yeah, okay, let's see how this is, but it might not be like amazing. And then you watch it and it's like, oh my god, like. The action of this movie is really sweet. Like, you talked about, he kind of takes down that Russian village, and it's like the one take shot as it like follows him like climbing up like this gigantic wall, coming down, and then like fighting people on horseback and stuff.
Yep.
And there's all these little details in the background because it's like a pretty big battle, and like it's so intricate, and it's like, man. Like he really pulled it off though. Like it was great.
He did. I'll respond to your last point first, and then I want to jump back to the Odin stuff that you talked about at the beginning, because that's one of my favorite parts of the movie. I loved the one take and one camera shot that Eggers does when the berserkers are all running into the village, and like you mentioned, it just puts you directly into the action, and makes you feel like you're seeing everything from the character's perspective. And I was listening to an interview with Alexander Skarsgard, who plays Amleth. He's the star of the movie, and he said that it was exhausting filming that because they had to get everything right. So of course they had to do multiple takes, and just imagine for the entire day just having to over and over again climb over that wall of the village, and like I can't even imagine how exhausting that must have been.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like the opening of Halloween where it's like the one take shot where it goes through the house and whatnot. That like just that like without all of the like tons of extras and stuff in the background, They had to do it 3 times, and even then, they still couldn't get it right in one go. And the final product's a mix of shots.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. It looks pretty good. They mask it pretty well, the cuts and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like that must have been a huge pain in the ass.
No, I can only imagine. And of course, Skarsgård was talking about it. It was exhausting, but like this is a movie that he has wanted to make his entire life. Like he said, because he is Nordic. I think he's from Sweden. And he said ever since he was a little kid, he had an ambition to be an actor because he comes from a family of actors. His brother played Pennywise in the It movies, amongst other things. But that's probably the biggest thing that people would know him from.
Yeah.
But he has, ever since he was a kid, wanted to make a Viking movie. So this was kind of like his dream role. And it really comes through in his dedication to the performance. I mean, he's just downright frightening in some scenes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I've only seen him in a few things, but it's all been like stuff that's just kind of not great. So when he was cast, I was like, oh, I don't know about that. No, he's great in this movie. And I like to imagine that because his dad was in Thor, so I like to imagine that he is just like, "Hey, Dad, I was in the better Viking movie."
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of the Marvel Comics character Thor, and I like the first Thor movie, but it's not even comparable to this.
Yeah.
This is a work of art, I think, a cinematic masterpiece, in a way that Thor is just kind of a studio mandated product to come out and within that I think it's a pretty entertaining movie, but this is like clearly a passion project for all involved. But going back to the thing that you mentioned about Odin's Ravens opening the film, one of the things that I love about Eggers as a filmmaker and as a writer is that he relies heavily on visual storytelling and making allusions to... He uses symbolism a lot, and he doesn't care if you don't know what his symbols are that he uses, but if you know what they are, you're like, oh man, that's so cool. So the thing that I liked about the visual storytelling in this movie the most is that Odin's presence is felt in almost every like major stage of Amleth's life. Like we open the movie with Odin's ravens flying over Amleth's village, so immediately like, oh, like Odin has chosen this kid and this family for some sort of mythological drama that's about to occur. Everything goes down. And then when he's a Viking berserker, he joins up with this band, and the leader of them is this old wise man that has a messed up eye. And during one of the rituals that the berserkers do to pump themselves up for battle the night before, he wears a headdress that resembles the one Odin wears in Norse mythology. And in Norse mythology, Odin would often walk amongst regular people on Midgard and disguise himself as a mortal and sort of test people and convey lessons and knowledge to them in sort of arcane ways. And if you don't know that, you don't know that guy is Odin. He just seems like an old guy. But I can tell also that it's him because there's a scene after they raid the village where he approaches Amleth and he says, ever since we took you in when you were a child, we knew that you had a heart of iron, kind of referring to how good of a warrior he is, you think, at the time. And then the movie ends with Amleth being stabbed in the heart with an iron sword. And you're like, okay, Odin's like telegraphing how this man is going to die with him without him even really understanding it at the time. But that's such something Odin would do, So
yeah, that's just great setup and payoff.
Yeah, it's but like if you don't know any of that stuff about Norse mythology, it's just like this old guy that shows up in a scene and he like looks kind of creepy and intimidating in the ritual scene. But if you understand the symbols and the things that Eggers is making allusions to, I mean, it provides another level to the film, and stuff like that makes his films infinitely rewatchable, which I have always felt with the first two films he made, and this one as well. Like I want to see it again, or wanted to see it immediately after I walked out of the theater again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Because you know that there's just going to be a ton of stuff that you probably didn't catch the first time, knowing like exactly where everything's going.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I also, you know, the ultimate expression of Odin, of course, at the end is when he actually does show up in sort of his ghostly guise to save Amleth, as he's like tied up in a barn, and his uncle had savagely beaten him, and Odin sends his ravens to untie him and help him complete his quest of vengeance. So I think the visual storytelling is one of my favorite things. The Odin thing is just one example. I mean, there's some crazy imagery in this movie, mythological stuff that's just awesome.
Yeah, it goes a lot farther than I really expected. Because I only saw the one trailer, but it seemed to be, from the one that I saw, like they were advertising it more as like, I don't know, just, like Viking man is gonna get revenge.
Yeah.
That's kinda, so I wasn't like prepared for like all that kind of stuff, like seeing the Valkyrie and whatnot.
Yeah, they have that shot of the Valkyrie in the trailer, and you see the man who's like Odin as he's walking amongst the mortals in the ritual, and you see the face of the Norn. But in the trailer, besides the Valkyrie, I suppose, it's not really clear what those things are. So I was just kind of like, oh, like this lady with this creepy headdress on. Who's this? That looks interesting. But she's actually like a mythological entity, and you're like, oh, this is really cool.
Yeah, which is funny because a lot of his like horror sensibilities kind of creep in with stuff like that, and Bjork is awesome in this. I just know her as being like a really funny like Icelandic woman. So it was very interesting seeing her be scary. Like the main thing I think about when I think of her is the like interview where she talks about her TV and how she thought there was like people living in her TV, I think.
What?
Yeah, it's like this really funny video. And she's just holding a TV in her lap like the whole time, and like I think she's like unscrewing the back of it.
That's incredible. I didn't know anything about her, but going into this, I hadn't seen Alexander Skarsgård in any movies or any television shows or anything, because I know he was on, was it True Blood or Vampire
He was
Diaries?
on True Blood.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I know you've seen that he's in is Godzilla vs. Kong. He's like the main guy on the Kong side.
Oh, that's right. Okay,
so
I have seen him in something. I'm dumb.
Remembering human characters in a Godzilla movie.
Yeah, true. But to be fair to that movie, the Kong humans.
Those side are a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
The Godzilla
agree.
humans are awful in that. But anyway, so yeah, no, I thought Bjork stole the scene that she had in this. I mean, she is just she is a Norn in the movie, and I think pretty much everybody in the movie disappears into their roles. I mean, it's so there's not a bad performance in the movie at all.
Yeah, exactly, and. When they cast Ethan Hawke and Nicole Kidman, I had like that like split moment where I was like, oh, like I hope that they're not like recognizable to the point where I'm thinking about that, when I watch the movie. Because sometimes some actors have that, and
Definitely.
mainly for Nicole Kidman before Ethan Hawke. But no, like I agree, like everybody kind of just disappears and they just become their character.
Nicole Kidman's performance was probably the most surprising to me. Not that Nicole Kidman, I think, is a very talented actress. I've seen her in things that I really like her in. I wasn't surprised that she was good, but I was surprised at the scary places that she goes to in this.
Yeah, I didn't expect any of that too. Like the part where she like has her hysterical laugh as he leaves. I wasn't expecting stuff like that.
Yeah, and for
Like I said,
context,
there's a lot of like his horror sensibilities that like really hit for stuff like that way
yep.
more than I expected going in. Like I think there's an argument to be made. This is like horror fantasy.
Yeah, which is totally what Conan is in many of the stories. That and it's the reason why I love the Hyborian Age world more than other kind of high fantasy fiction worlds. The Howard stories have that element of like cosmic mythological horror. It's kind of like a mix between Lovecraft and the mythological historical stuff that Howard was inspired by as well. I think of stories like the Slithering Shadow, where there's like this ancient demon that like stalks the halls of this city where everyone lives in like the fantasy version of the Matrix. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. And this movie has stuff like that in spades. It's so cool.
Yeah, exactly. And having not read Conan, like the main thing I was thinking of was like, I don't know, I watched like a lot of fantasy as a kid, and a lot of the stuff that I liked had elements that were really scary. Like when you're a kid, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I loved Lord of the Rings, but like I thought like Gollum was like super like creepy. Like some of the orc stuff's creepy. Maybe like less so because this is like more like actiony, but like even stuff like the Balrog. And then, you know, like Clash of the Titans was another big one when I was a kid. And like, you get like Medusa and stuff like that. That was pretty freaky. And I think his name's like Caliban in that movie. He was like the most horrifying thing ever when I was a kid. I was like, oh man, that guy.
It is fucking guy.
Yeah, exactly. This fucking guy. This guy's fucking scary. Because I think he like attacks Perseus while he's like in like a field of like really tall grass or something. I can't remember. It's been so long since I've seen it. But it was like, oh fuck, this is scary. So it reminded me of like those experiences as a kid, but like as an adult.
Yeah. No, I totally
like,
agree.
man, like he really captured that feeling.
He did. There's two scenes that stand out to me in terms of like the horror elements creeping in more than other stuff, because the whole movie does have a very dark, like mystical fever dream sort of feel to it, which I liked quite a bit. It's almost like you're with this guy who's consumed with this dark instinct to want to kill somebody. You know, it's really cool. But the two scenes that stick out to me the most in that regard are there's one scene where they basically do the scene from the Arnold Conan movie where he stumbles into that cave with the old Atlantean king holding the sword, and takes the Atlantean sword and dusts it off, and then the Atlantean king's skeleton comes to life, and Arnold kind of has to like fight the skeleton to win the sword. In this, Amleth is going after this ancient magic sword that the wizard who tells him about it says is hungry for vengeance, and it's like supernaturally sharp, and all of that kind of stuff. It's the ultimate badass sword. So
yeah,
he kind of spelunks into this old Viking tomb, and there's a old Viking king skeleton holding the sword, and he takes it, or tries to, and he has to fight this zombie Viking king, and it's a very similar scene. It goes on for longer, but I just instantly thought of the first Conan movie when he was doing that. It was really cool.
Oh, good call. Yeah. The thing I was thinking of with that was, oh god, this is a terrible book, but in Ultimatum from Marvel, there's a part where Captain America and Thor are in hell, like Viking hell, with one L, and they're just fighting zombie Vikings. And I was like, this book sucks, but that's an awesome visual. I need to see this in a movie.
Yep.
And then I got to Ragnarok, and it's like, oh, here we go. They're setting up zombie Vikings. Oh, this is lame, though.
Yeah.
They ruined it.
Yeah.
So when that happened in this movie, it was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
It's only
so
the
cool.
one, but it's awesome.
Yeah. I always like because that's a pretty common fantasy trope, like fighting the old zombie king or like zombie warriors thing, but it's a welcome trope. I agree with you. It's a really cool visual.
Yeah, no, exactly. What was your other big horror thing? You said you had two.
Yeah, it was that, and then I think one of my favorite scenes in the entire film is actually before that, when he goes to see the wizard. There's this Nordic mystic that lives in a cave near the farming village that his uncle has, and he's this creepy looking old guy with a giant white beard, of course. And he has the severed head of Willem Dafoe's character, who we see at the beginning of the film. And he's sort of like a court jester and advisor to Ethan Hawke, who's Amla's father, who's killed at the beginning of the movie. He seems to know what's going on more than anyone else. He calls out like what the twist of the film ends up being, which you'll know if you've read Hamlet or seen it produced before. So when Ethan Hawke was killed, he was also murdered, but the wizard has his severed, mummified head, and he cuts off some of Willem Dafoe's hair and throws it into a fire and casts a spell so that Willem Dafoe's spirit like possesses the wizard briefly, and he speaks to Amleth. It's really unsettling and creepy, but also awesome at the same time. It's so cool.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'll add one more horrorish moment. I had that when he first goes into hell. In the climax,
yep,
with like the big loud music blaring and like all the fire, I was like, man, this is tense.
Yeah. No, that stuff was all awesome. The final battle is just gorgeous.
Yeah, and both characters are mainly in silhouette, and it looks really good.
Yeah, no, it's so cool. One of the things that I really liked about the look of this movie, this just brought to my mind when you mentioned the silhouette thing. This movie is Eggers specifically lit this movie in such a way where he only used lighting that would have been available at the time to light the scenes. So it's either like natural daylight or torches, so it kind of gives this like shadowy darkness to the night scenes, which take place frequently, because after Amleth gets the magic sword, the kind of weakness of it is that it can only be unsheathed at night, so he has to kind of become like a creature of the night, vengeance Batman kind of character. It's awesome. And when he's going around and doing a lot of the machinations to ruin his uncle's life before he murders him, the lighting is just appropriately mysterious of the time and also gorgeous. Like a less talented filmmaker would like try to be like, oh, we're going to only use torches, and it would look terrible,
Yeah, I actually didn't realize that about the lighting. That's really interesting. But this movie does, all three of his movies look really great. And all three have very, very distinct visual styles just of their own.
Yep.
Like he himself doesn't have a specific visual type, I don't think, where you can go like, oh, like that's Robert Eggers that did that.
Yeah. No, he's just like probably, this movie probably cemented him as my favorite young filmmaker working at the moment. I don't think anybody compares to him. For me, like Ari Aster would have been up there for me in terms of horror directors when Hereditary came out, because that's a movie I like just as much as The Witch in the Lighthouse. But his sophomore effort, Midsummer, I wasn't really into.
Yeah, no, same here. And for whatever reason, I guess they're just destined to always release a film the same year.
Yeah,
because he got his third film coming out this year.
Which, hey, I mean, that's a pretty good present. Even though I didn't like Ari Aster's second film, I mean, he's still that movie is not poorly made. I just think maybe it's the writing. I don't know what it is. I haven't seen it in a while, but it just didn't click with me in the way that Hereditary did.
No, that's what I had, and I think that movie's just kind of overly long, too.
I'd say that too. Yeah, I think that's probably true. So yeah, let's get into sort of the narrative of the movie and the character arcs and stuff a little bit, because I think this movie is a very tightly written and very character-driven story, despite the fact that it's such a kind of sprawling mythological epic sort of thing. Did you have any thoughts about like the kind of journey that Amleth goes on as a character, or any of the other side characters as you were watching it?
Yeah, I really liked, especially, like our main two characters, Amleth, and I can't remember what Anya Taylor-Joy's character's name is.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head either, unfortunately.
But they have like really great chemistry too.
They do.
And I don't know, just like everything about the relationship I thought was pretty believable. And like that's something that could have come off as really forced. Mm-hmm. Where you have like these kind of two slave people where, one of them kind of starts off like, yeah, like you may have, like you're basically a wolf in sheep clothing. Like, I can tell that.
Right. Yeah. And
then they kind of end up, getting closer together as the film goes on, to the point where she is like his queen in a way, since he's like a prince, but
yeah, and they definitely go full tilt into that by the end when they see, or we see, excuse me, his royal line being continued, and it looks like his daughter becomes the queen of some settlement in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Because she kind of goes off with some other Vikings to be the head of like another land, I guess.
Yeah.
That he's got favor with.
One of the things that I loved about this movie is how it plays with the sort of Shakespearean notion and in the human notion, I suppose. But Shakespeare played with this kind of stuff a lot, so it kind of gets attributed to him. I loved that Amleth is such a product of his parents, in that he is in many ways just like his father, and in many ways just like his mother. So like, his father, we learn by the end of the film, basically was a berserker in his younger years, just like Amleth becomes in between his quest for vengeance, beginning when he's a child, and then when he kind of is put back on that path by the Norn towards the beginning of the film. He is also just kind of like raping, pillaging, and burning, doing like, pretty evil things as a Viking warrior, which was very common for the time. I mean, he wasn't particularly evil compared to any of the other people in the society that he lived in. I mean, these were people that lived to make war and take slaves. I mean, like everybody that is a Viking in this movie is nobody's hands are clean, so he's just like his father in that way, but he's also like his mother in that his mother met his father because she was a slave girl that his father took advantage of and got pregnant, and then he ended up marrying her so that he could maybe get a male heir out of the situation, and it worked out. And when Amleth was a kid, she told him that she was a noble bride from Brittany, which is modern day England, of course, which would have been believable to him because the Vikings, were famous for raiding and having settlements in England. So, that's not altogether unbelievable. But Amleth also masquerades as a slave and does the work of slaves, just like his mother did in her younger life. So he kind of, at various points in his life, lives the experiences of his parents by just circumstance. I mean, it's not like he tries to emulate his father and his mother. He just is like them because he's their son, and he ends up in those predicaments because it's kind of like his fate. Like Willem Dafoe says at the beginning of the movie when he's a child. Your fate is set; you can't escape it.
Yeah, exactly, and it's that kind of thing where history kind of repeats itself, and you become your parents.
Exactly, and the thing that I really like about Amleth's character arc in this movie is that he's on this quest for revenge because he doesn't really have anything else to live for. And throughout the course of the movie, like you mentioned earlier, he falls in love with Anya Taylor-Joy's character. She gets pregnant with their child, which we learn by the end of the movie ends up being twins. And suddenly he has something to live for, and he almost runs off with her and tries to establish a kingdom, but realizes that, because he has murdered his uncle's wife, his son, and both of his sons he ends up murdering by the end of the film, but the cycle of violence will continue because he has perpetuated it at this point. Like, no matter where they go in the Viking kingdoms, his uncle will hunt them and kill him, his wife, and his children, or at least try to. So his quest for revenge sort of morphs into a quest for protecting the one thing in his life that he's found that means something to him, and he dies ensuring their future. They are shown to go on. His royal line continues. His children are safe. They go on to rule a kingdom of their own. And he gets to live in Valhalla and party with Odin for the rest of his life because he died an honorable death in battle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And because I think it's Bjork's character that tells him he has to either choose between like hatred for his enemies or love for his kin.
The wizard tells him that too. They both.
I couldn't remember. Yeah, okay. I couldn't remember if it was her or the wizard, but yeah, I guess it's both of them. And then he kind of ultimately decides that he can kind of live both ways, like you said, where he's going to kind of end the cycle of violence in order to protect his family.
Yeah, and I just love that because, I've seen some of the reactions to this movie online. It's not widespread, so I don't want to make it seem like, there's this giant faction of people on Twitter that don't understand this movie. But I've seen some people say that, like, this movie is just about, like, bloodthirsty vengeance and nothing else. And that is part of the movie. And I think in that way it's realistic about what Viking culture was like and how just people in general were at this period in the history of human civilization. But by the end, it becomes something more than that. And it's not just about like this guy, getting vengeance and like glorifying it. Like this quest for vengeance, like, is extremely destructive. So many lives are ended by him and his uncle for really no reason. I mean, there's scenes where his uncle just like is slitting the throats of slaves because he's so angry that his son was murdered. Like just needless death and destruction, villages burning down. None of this needed to happen. And Amleth and his uncle end up dying, pretty gruesome deaths by the end. I mean, he doesn't get to have a happy ending. This man shouldn't get a happy ending, and he doesn't, So I don't know. I think it portrays how destructive and how it creates a cycle of violence, vengeance as a human emotion and drive is,
Yeah, well, it's so nice to kind of go back to a very classic template for a revenge story like this, because so many revenge movies like this now, where the person kills everybody on the way to the person that they're actually after, and then they get to that person and they go like, I forgive you, and then they go about their lives.
Yep.
But like, no, like this is what's cool about revenge things, is that like it tears you apart and it ends with nobody being happy,
Except for the thing that he set out to protect, and what his quest ended up morphing into, which is awesome, I think. So
yeah, exactly. He kind of learns to have a little bit more to his life than just the revenge.
Yeah, and he even says that at one point. Like, what he's sitting, I think, with Anya Taylor-Joy, like in a hot spring, or maybe it's before they go in. I don't remember. And he's like, this is the first time I've actually like felt something other than anger and hatred my entire life, and it's like, whoa, like it hits you in a place,
Yeah, exactly.
And Alexander Skarsgård's performance speaks to that. I mean, he is just he's a feral beast throughout this entire, like literally at some points when he's like howling at the moon like a wolf. It's nuts.
Yeah, exactly. No, that stuff's great. All the kind of like animalistic sides to them.
Yeah.
A lot of the screaming.
Yeah, no, totally. And why I was sort of reminded of Conan so much when I was watching this, I mean, like, this guy is a bastard and anti-hero, just like Conan is. I mean, like, I think one of the mistakes people make in getting into the Conan character on either side of the aisle of sorts. I don't mean in a political sense. I mean in the sense of perception of the character. A lot of people, I think, are repulsed by Conan as a character in that, he's a man with very loose morals. He murders people. He's very spiteful. He's prone to being vengeful, and he hates his enemies. And I think that's kind of the point. Like, you're supposed to be repulsed by him to some degree. But he's also a human being that has some admirable qualities as well, like Amleth does in this story. I mean, Amleth is not a complete villain in this, but he is a man that has a lot of demons, Well,
yeah, it's one of the biggest things that I think a lot of writers mistake nowadays, which is that characters don't have to be likable, they just have to be believable.
Yes. And telling stories about people who aren't likable, I think, is important, because they speak to the parts of being human that are horrifying and repugnant to us. I mean, it's everybody in the world is not a perfect person. Everybody's experienced trauma in their lives, and that can create aspects of yourself that you don't like. And I think portraying characters that have these demons and are on quests based on very negative human emotions, it's important to show this aspect of humanity as sort of a cautionary tale. And I think that's what this movie largely is in many ways.
Yeah, no, exactly. And yeah, I don't know, it seems like, because when I saw it, and again, not trying to make it seem like everybody had this reaction, but I had, like a theater full of people who were like laughing at most of the stuff that wasn't funny, saying that a lot of the stuff was stupid. I got the they spelled hell wrong. They only spelled it with one L. Complaint during the movie. And then just kind of walked away with like, oh yeah, that was just nothing but like masculinity for 2 hours. Let's go home and, I don't know, watch Big Bang Theory.
Oh no! Why isn't Stan Lee in a Fantastic Four bathrobe in this?
Oh man, exactly. It's like, remember real movies?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was one of the most refreshing things for me. And, like, you know, I'm kind of a jaded comic book and superhero fan at this point. You know, like, I love comic books as a medium. You know, comic books are one of the reasons why I got into Conan in the first place, because, you know, the Conan comics were and are still really popular. But the way that Marvel has just become such an assembly line production, where it's very few of their projects released now are products of the passion of the filmmakers making them, like the original, like, Raimi Spider-Man movie, or, you know, name any other great superhero movie back in the day, or even like the Batman, which just came out, where the filmmaker is like, yeah, I really like this character and I want to tell a story about them, rather than it being like, all right, yeah, Kevin Feige has like the next 10 years of films you're going to see planned out, and this guy that's hot in Hollywood right now, he's assigned Blade, go make it, and you know, we'll prepare the script for you, we'll pre-visualize everything in CGI so that you just have to direct the scenes where people talk. You know, this is the complete opposite of that, and it was so refreshing for me.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's really funny for me, like, kind of looking at my, like, list of films I've seen this year, where it's like you get the bottom and there's like 6 different, like, 1-star ratings that are all, you know, whatever big franchise thing. And then you get to the top of the list and it's like, oh, the Northman, X, the Batman, which is obviously a franchise thing, but is, you know, like you said, much more a like passion project. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, you just have like all these movies where it's like, oh yeah, like, no, real movies do exist, and you get the bottom of my list and it's all the franchise shit.
Well, yeah, and then you look at the box office results and it's completely inverted from that, which makes me really sad. You know, like, you know, Spider-Man No Way Home made enough money to end world hunger, and the Northman isn't going to make its budget back. Like, that just makes me, like, existentially depressed, you know?
I know, it's like, how the fuck do we live in a world where Morbius made more money than the Northman?
Yeah. You know, it's insane. And also, I think Morbius cost about the same amount of money to make as well. And that has me further convinced that movie is just a Ponzi scheme, because this movie looks amazing and that movie is just like, holy shit.
Well, that's what I feel with the MCU in general, because it's like most of it's filmed on like shitty green screens, and like all the money goes to, you know, like whatever actor.
Yeah, no, totally. And that's, you know, that speaks to, you know, this film specifically. I listened to an interview with Eggers where he was talking about, you know, what they spent money on for this movie. And, of course, you know, when you're making a movie like this, you can't, he said that he could have chosen to go insane with the scale and have hundreds of Viking ships and all those kind of things. But he's like, we would have had to do them all on green screen CGI. And he's like, I think using our money to spend it on building 4 real Viking longships based on archaeological specifications that it really exist for the actors to be on, and film them so like they actually look like they're there. That was more important to him than having a film that was like gigantic in scale. And it really shows. Like, I love how authentic even like the village looks in this. I mean, it's the total opposite of like some of the golden age of Hollywood movies where you'll see, like, for example, a sword and a sandal epic set in ancient Greece or ancient Rome, where everything's clean, everyone lives in like Corinthian column villas, even like the poorest, you know, plebs or whatever. No, like, people were living in like mud huts, dude, that were poor. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's, and there was probably shit all over the streets. Like, ancient societies were not what I think the glorification of them has produced images in people's minds of. Like, and Eggers is very conscious of that. And I loved that about this movie.
Yeah, when we first get to the village, actually, you know, I think It was around when he was like hiding on the roof of one of the buildings, and he like hides his sword in it overnight or like during the day. And just seeing that, it reminded me a lot of Seven Samurai. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I haven't, but I have to at some point.
But they like fully, built the kind of village that movie mainly takes place in.
That's awesome.
And that was like a big thing, was that they were like, okay, like we can film this, on like a back lot or whatever. And the director was like, no, we're gonna actually build it. And it was like the most expensive film in Japan at the time. But like, it looks it.
Well, yeah, and
like every dollar is on the screen.
And that's one of the reasons why that film was so influential, I'm sure, and why people still watch it, because it looks so good, because they actually built the stuff.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good things about this movie. Are there any other points that you wanted to hit?
Nothing's coming off the top of my head, but like, there's so much to talk about in this movie. I feel like the second we finish, it's like, fuck, like there's like all these other things.
Well, you know what we can do? I think, because Josh couldn't be here with us today, I think maybe it'd be a good idea when this movie comes out on VOD, we should do like a commentary on it, so that because I definitely want to watch this movie again. As we're talking about it, I think it's becoming my favorite Eggers movie, but I still can't say that without watching it 3 or 4 times, because that's what I've done with his previous films, and I've noticed new things and found new things to enjoy every time I've rewatched them. So, yeah.
Like, I think for me right now, having only seen it once, it's I have it like in third under the other two, but it's also, like I said, 5 out of 5. It's my best film of the year so far. Yeah. And the more I see it, like, that could be shifted,
No, totally. And I don't, for me personally, just because like this speaks to so many of the things I love in general in like fiction. I mean, it's historical fiction, it's mythology, it's Shakespeare, it's horror, it's Conan, it's awesome. So like I don't see anything surpassing this for me personally as my favorite movie of the year. But I haven't seen Everywhere all at once, all the time. What is it called again?
Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is my 4th film of the year so far, but it is definitely up there. That movie's great.
Yeah, I've been hearing wonderful things about it, and I'm gonna try to go see it this week.
Oh, nice.
Or either go see it this week, or maybe I'm gonna try and see if they do like or early rentals or something. Because I'm in the support real movies mode at this point. Like, I would implore everyone, no, not just implore, beg them to see this if you're a fan of this kind of stuff at all, because this movie deserves people's support, and I promise you, like, this is an experience like no other. I mean, this is a movie that ends with Amleth's corpse being carried into Valhalla, like by a Valkyrie running into the sky on a horse while war drums play. Like, it's the most metal thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It's amazing. So if you like Conan, absolutely, you'll enjoy this movie quite a bit, I'd say.
Yeah, no, this film, it hits that like perfect level of like spectacle for the theater, where it's like, fuck yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah,
but like, it also is a movie.
Yep. Yep. It has a story and character arcs and themes, and
yeah, exactly.
It's not just like Hemsworth and stoned Mark Ruffalo goofing around and then they cobble a film together out of it.
Yeah. No, apparently this year decided it was going to, like, give me back a bunch of things from my childhood, but not in, like, a nostalgia way, like No Way Home. But, like, you got this kind of fantasy thing that, I talked about, like, was very much like a lot of experiences I had as a kid. And then you have one of the other best films of the year that has fucking Short Round is one of the main characters, and he's like one of the best movie characters of all time.
Yeah, I mean,
It's awesome.
yeah, that's one of the things that excites me the most about seeing it. Austin and I are huge Indiana Jones fans, so when he told me that Short Round was in this, was in that movie and was awesome in it, I was like, I gotta see this now.
Well, yeah, and I didn't know it when I saw it. Like after I watched it, I was like, "Oh, that guy and Michelle Yeoh like really carried the movie." And then our buddy Connor was like, "Oh, Short Round," and I was like, "Wait a minute, what the fuck did you just say?" You just completely you changed my worldview.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have noticed it probably unless you guys would have told me. I had a similar experience watching Red Sonja for the first time like a couple months ago, because that's a movie I didn't grow up on and didn't see until recently. But I did grow up on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, and the actor who plays Kino, the ninja pizza man in that movie, is in Red Sonja as a bratty child king in it. And I was like,
oh, interesting.
This is insane. I had like the reverse thing, you know?
I guess we kind of had that too when we did the Patreon commentary for, let's quick plug, for Conan the Destroyer, when we learned that his like comedic sidekick is Bob the Goon from Batman.
That was nuts. Yeah. Speaking of which, before we close out the show here, this is going to be free for everybody. I'm actually going to put this up, I think, as a celebration for hitting 200 subscribers, because I just hit that today. And
yeah, congratulations, dude.
Thank you.
You're going to overtake me pretty quick.
Well, I mean, partly because of you and, you know, your contributions to the Patreon show and this show as well. I love having you on, my friend, and Josh, too. I mean, you guys have been the two go-to co-hosts thus far. I mean, I hope to have our buddy John on to do some comic book stuff and some of the other guys that we know. So, you know, that'll be great. And, you know... so this is going to go up for free, but we also have done movies, commentaries for the first two Conan movies I have recorded. The first movie commentary is going to be going on the Patreon this week. I'll probably get it up by the weekend because that'll be the April show for the Patreon subscribers. So if you'd like to see Austin and Josh and I, who did the Tower of the Elephant free Patreon podcast episode that I put up with me, definitely check that out, because I think the commentary we did for that movie and Destroyer came out awesome. I think those were a lot of fun. So I hope you guys enjoy them too.
Hell yeah, I'm so excited for like Red Sonja and some of like the shittier stuff that we have planned, like Your Hunter from the Future, or even like Beastmaster. I think will be pretty awesome. Oh
yeah, dude. As far as official Conan movies, like, we've done the good ones. So Red Sonja is a pile of dog shit, but it's like a fun pile of dog shit, like, because it's just a shitty Arnold movie from the 80s. But the
yeah, because we don't make B movies like that anymore.
No, not at all. No, like, I think I've told you before, but my favorite scene in that movie, there's a scene where Red Sonja and her crew with like the bratty prince and his bodyguard wander into this cave, and there's like a water dragon that like starts fighting them, and then Arnold like inexplicably shows up out of nowhere because they had gotten like separated from him early in the film, and he just like jumps into the water on this dragon and like tries to fight it with his sword.
Oh, I've seen that clip.
Yeah, and like his sword like bounces off of it, and this thing, you know, for context for people that haven't seen it, it looks fake as fuck. Like, it's clearly like a machine water dragon. So the way they play it is Arnold hits it with his sword and it bounces off and makes a metal noise, and he goes, "Ah, it's a machine!" And they just like go with it, like, oh, you know, our prop is shitty, so we'll just say it's a machine. Apparently,
Suddenly it turns into your Hunter from the future. A bunch of stormtroopers show up, and then they're in the Death Star.
yeah, I mean, apparently, like, someone knows how to build machine dragons in the Hyborian Age. Like, I don't know.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. So look forward to all that stuff, and I'd like to thank you again, Austin, for joining me on the show. I love talking about this movie
Thanks
with
for
you.
having me.
Yeah, of course. We'll have to come back and do something in the future. If there's anything tangentially Conan related, maybe we'll do another special edition podcast on it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm down to do anything, so just let me know.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for listening to the show too, and check the links in the descriptions for all the the usual links regarding Patreon and the social media pages I've got for Conan Chronicles. Check all that stuff out, and
make sure you smash that like button, smash that subscribe button.
Exactly, and comment. The algorithm is our enemy. We have to conquer it.
Exactly. You need to have one of those little animations, Dan, where it shows the mouse scroll over and then click subscribe and then click the little bell.
No, I'll do for lack of a better term, anti-SJW grift, where they're like, oh, people are being unsubscribed from my channel, so hit the bell so that if the notifications stop, you'll know that the man is unsubscribing to you from my edgy content.
The system doesn't want you to know about the Northman. They want you to know about Morbius.
Yeah, exactly. Morbius is what the algorithm is pushing right now. Why do you think it swept opening weekend?
The Northman died in the streets tonight.
All right, on that note, I was Dan, and this was Austin.
Bye, guys.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Fate has no mercy.